Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Andersson Hockey Channel. Today we've got a couple of things to discuss, including a small AHL signing that includes a few things around the PTOs, a waiver update as Liam Foudy has been claimed off of waivers, and a couple of injury updates as well as some trade rumors involving the Anaheim Ducks, Calgary Flames, Vancouver Canucks, and a couple of others. And we'll get to all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Andersson Hockey Channel. Now, before I start this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. We are so close to 200 subscribers. We're only 20 away, so remember, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Going over to a couple of news updates here. First with the PTO updates. I don't find this as much of a surprise, but Dylan Wells, who is a decent third-string goaltender, most likely an AHL player, wound up being released off of his PTO with the Nashville Predators. Not overly surprised there. The Preds have Saros, Askarov, and Lankinen, so at best he would have been like a fourth-string goaltender, which I'm not sure he would have wanted to be, so not overly surprised there that the Predators release him off his PTO. He's a fourth-string, fifth-string goaltender. He's not going to give them very much, so I'm not overly surprised that the Preds released him. But the other one was that Sam Gagner was released off his PTO by the Edmonton Oilers, and he signed with Bakersfield, which is the AHL affiliate of the Edmonton Oilers. So Sam Gagner signs the AHL-only deal right now. It's not overly bad. Gagner's a decent and older player for the Edmonton Oilers. If they run into enough injuries and they want to bring him up, they can always sign him to a two-way NHL contract. But for the time being, Gagner will be heading to the AHL, and he's off his PTO, so that's good news to see there. Gagner's a solid NHL forward, and if they do run into injuries, or if he's playing overly well at the AHL level, I do expect him to possibly get an NHL contract. But at least his PTO's done. Wells' PTO is done. That leaves us with only 4 PTOs left in the NHL that have not been resolved yet. That is Danton Heinen in Boston, that is Mark Pysyk and Austin Wagner in Pittsburgh, and that is Brett Ritchie at Florida. They have not all been released off of their PTOs yet, but they also have not signed NHL or AHL contracts yet. So it's going to be interesting to see if those guys wind up signing the NHL, signing the AHL, or being released off their PTOs. But those are the 4 guys that are left. A quick waiver update here from around the NHL. Nashville Predators wound up claiming Liam Foudy, who was on waivers on Saturday. As we talked about, Foudy is a really good player. He was a young player who we talked about on Saturday being placed on waivers. He's a decent player. He can definitely be a solid third line, maybe center/winger. He's a very versatile forward, former first-round pick. I definitely do like this fit, in my opinion, by Nashville. After claiming Fagemo off of waivers, they claim another guy off of waivers. They're getting a couple of really good players in their lineup via waivers, which is really good news after they lost Tolvanen last year on waivers. So really good to see the Predators claim some of these younger players on waivers. I definitely think that Foudy, he should be a really good bottom six forward or like third line forward. I think he has the skill set to be a really good NHL player. But yeah, his offense hasn't contributed to the NHL. Yeah, I think one good year a couple of years ago, but since then he's been more of like a fringe NHL player, more of an AHL player. So I think a fresh change of scenery is something that could definitely do wonders to a guy like Foudy. In my opinion, he could be a fantastic fit in Nashville on like a third line. That team, like I said, before the last couple of games had a lot of trouble goal scoring, so maybe if he can find his offensive game, he can definitely help the Nashville Predators. So I know the Jackets were trying to sneak Foudy off of waivers after activating Werenski off of injury reserve, but it just doesn't work out. So Foudy's a really good player in my opinion. He's going to be fantastic in Nashville, a good third line addition, and a good pickup in my opinion by the Nashville Predators. But that's the only waiver update we had. There was no waiver updates on Sunday, no waiver updates on Mondays. We've had no waiver updates over the past couple of days, so I'm not sure when we'll see the next waiver update, but that's the only waiver update we have right now. Nashville claims Liam Foudy off of waivers, which is really interesting. We do have one quick suspension of note to talk about here. The Calgary Flames defenseman Andersson, who took a very big hit very late in the game on Friday against Patrick Laine, it was a really dirty hit. There were seconds left. The Jackets were already going to win, so it was not a real necessary hit. It was definitely an illegal hit. He wound up getting suspended. A lot of people were expecting him to get suspended. He wound up getting suspended 4 games, so he was suspended his first game on Sunday, and then there's a couple more games that he's going to be suspended for, including today's action. I think they play again on Thursday, and then they play again on Sunday. So definitely, I expect him to probably miss all of those games. He has appealed to the suspension, so maybe it gets reduced to maybe like 1 more game less, so maybe it gets reduced to 3, but it was a pretty bad hit in my opinion, and it does warrant something of a significant suspension, like a 4-game suspension. It's definitely a longer suspension that we've seen in a while, but definitely I do expect Rasmus Andersson to probably remain out for the next little while, so it'll be interesting to see, but that's a really bad blow for the Calgary Flames to lose one of their top defensemen for the next little while due to suspension. Hopefully he's ready when he gets back, but that was a pretty bad hit, and I do think it warrants the 4-game suspension, so we'll have to wait and see what happens with Andersson there. Going over to a couple of injury notes from around the NHL. First, Patrik Laine, who did take that hit from Rasmus Andersson, has an upper body injury his day and if I'm correct, has been placed on injury reserve, so not good news for the Jackets there. Laine's a really good middle six forward, so to lose him for any significant period of time is not great, and hopefully he can recover in the not too distant future. Ilya Mikheyev, who missed the first week and a half of the season for Vancouver Canucks due to injuries sustained last year, was cleared to play and got back into game action for the Vancouver Canucks, so that was good to see for the Canucks. Really good news there. On top of that, we had Brett Pesce have a lower body injury. He's going to be out for an unknown period of time. That's not really good news for the Carolina Hurricanes. Jaden Schwartz was cleared to play for the Seattle Kraken, but Andrei Burakovsky sustained an injury in the game against the Rangers, and he's going to be out for the next 6 to 8 weeks, so upwards of possibly 2 months due to a upper body injury. So I expect that would be a huge blow to the Seattle Kraken. Burakovsky is a solid middle six winger, so to see him get out of the game action for the next little while is awful news for Seattle. Hopefully he's going to do really well and recover from this, but it's not really good news there. Going over to a couple of other guys, Michael Carcone and Jason Zucker were both injured in their game on Saturday against Anaheim Ducks. Both have a injury, Carcone upper body injury, Zucker lower body injury. It sounds like Zucker may be a little bit more longer term, but at this point in time they're both out for an unknown period of time, so hopefully we get a more significant timetable on them, but not really good news there for the Arizona Coyotes. Connor McDavid had upper body injury. He's going to be out for the next 1 to 2 weeks due to it. That's a horrible blow for the Oilers. He hurt something in the game against the Winnipeg Jets, missed the remainder of the third period, missed the entirety of overtime, which means it's really serious if he's missing overtime. So not really good news there. Hopefully he's not over for an overly long period of time. It's just the next week or two, and it's not going to be out for an extended period of time longer than that. But that's a really big blow to Edmonton, especially considering that their starter 1-3-1. So now their best player in for the next handful of games is not going to be really good news for the Oilers. Klim Kostin has undisclosed injury in his day for the Detroit Red Wings. Anthony Thornton, who was a player on season opening injury reserve for the Arizona Coyotes, has been cleared to play and sent back down to the AHL. Matthew Savoy, who was a player who was on season opening injury reserve in Buffalo, he was cleared to play, and he's been sent down to the AHL in a conditioning stint. Lucic and Forbert both have undisclosed injuries for the Boston Bruins on their day-to-day right now, so not great news for the Bruins there. Taylor Hall's had a setback. Hall has a shoulder injury and is going to be out week to week, so really bad blow for the Blackhawks there to lose their top line forward who's playing with Connor Bedard for the next couple of weeks. Now, the last time Hall was diagnosed being week to week, he wound up coming back a couple of days later, so maybe it's not a whole bunch week to week, but still, it's a really bad blow for the Hawks, and they'll probably miss him for the next couple of games. Daniel Tarasov's knee injury status has been updated to now week to week. So that's really bad news. I guess the Jackets are going to continue to run with Merzlikins and Martin for the time being. But Tarasov continues to be injured at the start of the year. Really bad news considering I thought Tarasov had a solid opportunity this year to solidify himself as the Jackets' backup. And then Alex Bucage in Colorado, who was also another guy starting on season opening injury reserve, has been indeed cleared and has been sent down to the minors. So not overly surprising there. Bucage is a decent player and is going to continue to do well. So that's your injury update there. Not overly abundance of huge significant injuries. But we do have Burakovsky out for the next couple of months. Hall and Tarasov are week to week right now. McDavid's going to be out for the next couple of weeks. So definitely a couple of big injuries for some of these teams. Not really overly great to see. And then going over to a couple of trade rumors here to discuss. First with the Calgary Flames on Saturday Night Headlines with Elliot Friedman. Friedman did say that there's been some progress made on a Noah Hanifin extension in Calgary, and that there's some optimism that Hanifin could remain in Calgary beyond this year. Hanifin's a good top pair defenseman, but there was a lot of talk in the offseason that Hanifin was going to be a trade chip, just given the fact that Hanifin was going to be moved because he doesn't want to play in Calgary. When they said that they wanted to either trade or sign them, it sounded like he wasn't really open to signing, so they were going to trade him. He wanted to play in the U.S., but it sounds like he's sort of rescinded that, and he might be open to an extension. It sounds like he's even working possibly on it to have an extension done with the Flames in the not-too-distant future. So hopefully that's true for the Flames fans. I know Hanifin's a pretty good top pair defenseman, playing with guys like Rasmus Andersson. So this is going to be really great news for Flames. We know that they could possibly need to move guys like Hanifin and Lindholm at the deadline if they have not signed each of those two guys yet by the deadline, because I don't think they can go into the beyond the deadline possibly and walk as free agents when they're so very valuable to a team. So if they can get Hanifin locked up, that would be a huge win for the Calgary Flames. I know I was surprised. I thought he probably would have been dealt in the offseason, and he probably would have been dealt at some point before the trade line. But to see that he's actually getting some contract negotiations with the Flames is really good to see. Hopefully this is going to be heading in the right direction. It sounds like it is. In my opinion, I would say a decent value deal for Hanifin would be probably somewhere between 4 and 6 years would be my guess, at around maybe $5.5 and $6.5 million. Maybe a little bit more than $6.5 million, somewhere around there would be my guess for a decent deal for Hanifin. He's definitely been a really good player for the Flames over the past couple of years, ever since he was acquired from the Carolina Hurricanes. So definitely, I think this would be a fantastic deal in my opinion, to get him signed. That will continue to have him as a top 4 defenseman with Rasmus Andersson, Mackenzie Weegar. They still have a couple of pending UFAs such as Lindholm as well as defenseman Tanev Storov. So that wouldn't be the last contract that they need to discuss, but it will definitely be a huge step in the right direction. Now, could Hanifin not wind up signing? It's possible. It's never done until it's done. So while Hanifin does sound like he's trending towards the right direction and will probably wind up signing in the not too distant future, it's not overly done. Maybe something goes wrong in negotiations. Maybe they're not able to come to terms on like the AV of the deal or things like that, and maybe Hanifin still ends up getting traded. We don't know yet, but it does sound like optimism is there for Hanifin possibly staying in Calgary instead of being traded, and maybe a signing comes in the not too distant future for the Calgary Flames. Going over to a couple of other reports that I discussed, I just saw an article on the internet, just some writer's opinion, not something that insiders are mentioning, but I saw an article saying that could Cam Fowler be a trade chip this year for the Anaheim Ducks? Now, the writer's not saying that the Ducks are actively shopping him right now, but he said that with the Ducks being in a rebuild and them looking to move on for some of their more veteran-type players, could Cam Fowler be a guy who could be on the move for the Anaheim Ducks? Fowler's a decent player. He's definitely done really well over the past couple of years. He's emerged as like a top pair defenseman in Anaheim with a guy like Jamie Drysdale, and given they have a young blue line, that's a really, really good thing there. But they're trying to move veterans to try and get some value on them, and could Fowler be a guy who winds up getting moved? I think it's possible, but not guaranteed. If you look at his past couple of years, point totals, he's usually hit around 20 to 30 points, except for the past 2 years when he has best career seasons up to date, putting up 42 points 2 years ago and 48 points the season prior. So he's definitely turned into a really good offensive point contributor, putting up between 40 and 50 points. So that's really good news for Fowler. He has 2 points in 5 games so far this year, so he started off pretty well this year too. I could see some teams have interest in Fowler. He's making $6.5 million for the next 3 years, this year plus 2 more. As a top pair left shot defenseman, I could see a lot of teams have interest in him if he was available. Now, would the Ducks want to trade him? I think that's a different question. Fowler's a decent top pair defenseman, but all the other Ducks on that team are pretty young. I mean, you have guys like Minyakov, Lunio, Lacombe, even Drysdale's quite young. So they need some veteran presence on this team. So would it make a ton of sense to trade Fowler? Maybe not, given the fact they could definitely use him as a veteran presence, at least for the next year. But it would be an interesting proposition. I think a lot of teams at $6.5 million, maybe it doesn't happen before a deadline, because there isn't a lot of cap space to go around, but maybe sometime in next year's offseason, I could see that being a possibility. Fowler's a decent defenseman. He would have 2 years left in the offseason at $6.5 million. He's a solid top pair defenseman who can put up 40 to 50 points. If the Ducks were willing to trade him, even though he's one of their leading veterans, and they were willing to give the reins to some of their younger players, like a Jamie Drysdale, Pavel Mintyukov, Owen Zellweger, and maybe go out and get some other veterans via free agency, I think they would be willing to trade Cam Fowler. And I would think there would be a lot of interest in Fowler. If Fowler was to be moved, I could see the Ducks get a first-round pick and a decent level prospect, if not more, in a return for Fowler. So definitely interesting to see. I don't think Fowler will be dealt yet, given he's one of their leading veterans on that young blue line for the Anaheim Ducks. But if they were to consider trading him, they would be able to get a huge package. And I think there would be a lot of teams interested in Cam Fowler, who can put 40 to 50 points as a top pair defenseman at $6.5 million cap for the next 2 seasons after this year. So definitely going to be interesting to see. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments. Does Fowler wind up getting dealt? I'd definitely love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. Also, Elliot Friedman listed 5 players, also on the Saturday night headlines, to watch out for and keep an eye on as possible trade options. I'm not going to get to all of these guys here, but I did mention 3 guys that I think were really interesting, including Connor Garland, Andrew Peeke, and Anthony Mantha. For Garland, we've talked about this over the past little while. Frank Saravalli mentioned a couple days ago that he thinks that the reason that Garland trade hasn't happened yet is because of term, and that a lot of teams are really wary of the term and they don't want a 3-year term, even if the Canucks were to retain some salary and bump his cap it down to $3.75 million. So it'll be interesting to see. It sounds like the Canucks are still open to retaining about 30% of his deal. They still want defenseman back. They still want to have $1 to $2 million cap relief in this trade. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But it sounds like it's possible that's maybe the term that's the holding up Connor Garland trade and not anything else. But definitely, I think Garland is a really good player. I think he'll definitely get moved. If not right now, then maybe closer to the deadline. I think he won't make it past the deadline being a Vancouver Canuck. I don't think that's possible. I'm still hearing guys like the Washington Capitals are interested. Even Elliot Friedman mentioned this on a Vancouver Canucks radio hit. He said that in a really good cap world, maybe a Garland for Mantha trade would work, and because the Caps do have interest in Garland. But Mantha's making more money than Garland is, and the Canucks are trying to get ahead on a Garland deal, so they can't really take on more money. So that type of deal, Garland for Mantha, would not work in my opinion. So if the Caps would want to acquire Garland, they would have to move Mantha first. So it sounds like the Caps still have interest. I think the Jackets still have interest. Not sure about the Preds with the injury of Luke Schenn, but I think they do still have some interest maybe to acquire him. A lot of people do think the Jets may have renewed interest after the Gabriel Velarde injury. I still think that there's teams like the Carolina Hurricanes and the Chicago Blackhawks who could have interest. I think there's still a handful of teams out there who would be interested in doing a Connor Garland trade, but it sounds like either retain money, his salary, or term on the contract are things that are holding out the Connor Garland deal right now. For Peeke, he's hit out most of the Jackets games. The other Jackets are currently trying to move a defenseman. Since Werenski came back, guys like Peeke and Boqvist are not in the lineup usually. Jake Bean sort of solidified the third pair left shot role, so I would not be overly shocked if he remained with the Jackets over the next little while. I know he was mentioned also in possibly being traded, but it sounds like he's found a really good spot with the Columbus Blue Jackets, so I wouldn't expect him to be moved. But Peake's only played 1 game in I think 5 games for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Boqvist hasn't done overly well either playing in games. The Jackets on the right side have a solid right side now of Werenski, Juracek, and Gudbranson. Gudbranson, a guy who I could see come out in a couple of games, like a game here, a game there, but he's sort of a really good third pair defenseman. On the left side, you have guys like Severson, Provorov, and Bean, so there's not really an overabundance of options there for Peeke and Boqvist to get into the lineup. So a lot of people do expect Peeke to possibly be moved and not just in future. Some of the Jackets, after Werenski got back, are trying aggressively to try and move the defenseman after the way Juracek played and them trying to keep him on the lineup. So that's going to be interesting to see. I do think they really want to move Peeke. He's got a couple of years left, in my opinion. I think like a $2.75 million cap hit. Boqvist, I think, has like a $2.45 million cap hit for 2 more years. So I do expect one of those guys to get moved in the not too distant future. It'll be just interesting to see which one winds up getting moved. Is it Peeke? Is it Boqvist? Definitely. Elliot Friedman mentioned Peeke, so I think he's the name we're probably going to have to watch out for, but I could see Boqvist get moved as well. If you look at Anthony Mantha, the Capitals have not done overly well to start the year. I think they could definitely try and upgrade the forward position. Like I said, Garland, there's a guy who they have interest in. According to some other reports, guys like Duclair could be of interest. Henrik and Hoffman could be of interest. So there's definitely some other guys they could have interest in, but they really want to move Anthony Mantha. Elliot Friedman did say they had some renewed interest to try and move Mantha. He's been a healthy scratch a couple of times this year. He hasn't done overly well, so I think they really do want to move him. The big question is how they move him with his cap hit. He has a $5.75 million cap hit, so unless he's moving to one of those bomb-dwelling teams who have a lot of money, like a Chicago or an Anaheim, he's not going to be able to get moved unless the Capitals take on something in return. So it'll be interesting to see, but I do expect Mantha to be someone who we have to watch out for over the next little while, especially leading up to a trade line. If he hasn't been dealt by a trade line, I'll expect him to definitely be moved, especially if the Capitals are out of the playoffs. I do think he could be moved, maybe even with some retained salary to another team. I still think Mantha is a good player as maybe a third line player. I just don't think the fit in Washington has been overly well, and I think a fresh start for Mantha could definitely do wonders for him. So it'll be interesting to see, but I don't expect him to be moved in a not distant future unless it's to a bomb dwelling team. And I do expect the Caps to try and move him to try and get some Caps flexibility, but unless they're able to do that, I don't expect that to happen. So definitely, that's all I'm going to talk about here today. I'll let you your guys' thoughts down in the comments. What do you think about the Foudy claim by Nashville? Is he going to be a good fit there? What do you think about Gagner signing the AHL? Do you think he'll get an NHL contract at one point? What do you think about the injury updates? McDavid, Burakovsky, Hall. Which one do you think was the worst injury in your opinion? Do you see the Calgary Flames signing Noah Hanifin, or is he going to be moved at some point? Do you see the Anaheim Ducks trading Cam Fowler at some point over the next maybe year and a half? Or is he going to be remaining with the Ducks for the next couple of years? Do you see the Canucks moving Garland in the not-too-distant future? Do you see Andrew Peeke being moved by the Jackets in the not-too-distant future? Do you see Anthony Mantha being moved by the Capitals in the not-too-distant future? Definitely. Let's hear your guys' thoughts down in the comments. So that's what I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video, and if you'd like to subscribe down below. We're so close to 200 subscribers, so thank you for all of your support. So don't forget to continue to subscribe. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So definitely check that out. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.